Cool. So, Power and Energy Society, we are doing a Python workshop because all the IEEE sister societies are pushing to move to Python because it is a, well, I'll get into that in a little bit, but getting started with Python. So one of the reasons why Python, we're doing a seminar over Python is because it's simple and it's easy to learn. It's object oriented and there's extensive libraries available for your use. So because there's a huge community within Python, you can really do a lot with it. So you don't necessarily need to always create something from scratch because there will always be someone there who has created something before you or created a block of code that you can integrate within your coding or your program. So then some of the applications of Python that we have are web development, prototyping, machine learning, AI, data analyzation, app design, and game development. One of the things I have to show you guys, I announced this, I think, yesterday, and it kind of blew my mind. It's still blowing my mind because I'm going through it. But, um, but I'm going to show you guys something real quick. So one of the guys from IEEE, who is our sister society, ended up holding a seminar that he had to cancel because no one showed up except for me. And basically, he was going over neural networks. So then I'm going to teach you guys Python today and get you guys into it. But this is all like his code right here. I hope you guys can see my screen. If not, I'm so sorry. Um, this is all Python code. So um, I'll we'll go on and come back to this in a little bit so that I can show you, what parts you'll recognize and the conventions and things like that. But long story short, he ended up going through a whole thing on neural networks and explaining how to use them, feeding it data, using a test set of data as well as feeding it data to learn from. And there's just all these this whole model, this whole presentation that he made. And I do want to make use of it in the future because it is amazing to learn about neural networks. But there's just so many capabilities with Python. Like this one reaches into neural networks and kind of what AI is or artificial intelligence. So in the future, you guys should probably look out for those as well if you're interested. So let me actually get back to, or actually let me show you another thing too. So RAS, Robotic Automation Society, which is another IEEE sister society, did a presentation really on OpenCV where you can do computer vision. You can you can get the computer to recognize an image. You can so this one, it shows you how to make an image blurry by using the code automatically. The computer will recognize the image and then from there blur out pieces of it, as well as maybe changing the threshold of the pictures so it'll change a colored picture all to grayscale just by feeding it the media. And you can do this for multiple things. So we'll come back to these later, but these are just some applications of Python for you guys to know. All right, cool. So is everyone still able to see my screen? No issues so far? All right, bet. So then the the one that I'm going to recommend to you guys today is if you want low commitment as far as learning Python, is I honestly don't, I found this today because I was trying to look for an easier way to get you guys to be able to access Python. So if I'm pronouncing this correctly, it's Replit, and it is an online IDE for Python, and I'll show you guys how to get to it in a little bit. One of the ones that I use is Visual Studio Code, as well as there's Google Colabs. So both of these, Colab as well as Replit, are things that you can use to access Python IDE while working collaboratively with each other. And then the same thing kind of with Visual Studio Code, but it requires a plugin. So an integrated development environment, so an IDE. So an IDE is basically an application that houses tools for development like a debugger and source code editor. So a debugger helps you troubleshoot your code if something's going wrong, as well as the source code editor allows you to basically type into text what you want the code to do. So for those of you that want to use the online compiler, I'm actually going to send this to you right now. And let me rip that from the slide. I'm actually going to send this in chat. And the coding language that I'll be going over today is actually Python 2. And the reason I'm going over Python 2 is not because I want you guys out of date, but because Python 2 has been around a lot longer of a time. So there's a bigger community, more libraries, more support if you guys ever have issues. But we will talk about some of the, hey Brenda, we will talk about some of the differences between Python 2 and Python 3. So one of the things about this is, so I went and sent you guys the IDE that is online. If you guys have any issues, or if you guys decide to use that one, just send me a yes or no, saying that you were able to access it. If not, then I can tell you how to install Visual Studio Code and everything. And I'll click on it too so that you guys can see it on my screen. God, okay. Mine automatically went to the Edge browser. All right, cool. So then it should look like this. So one of the reasons why I'm using this one is just because it's easily accessible to you guys. You guys don't necessarily need to download anything. So then you can use this one for now if you want. If anyone prefers to use like one that you actually download onto your PC, then I have the directions for Visual Studio Code, and I'll just kind of show you how that one works. So I've actually been tinkering with it for a while. So then here's just my code. Basically what happens is this one requires a lot more steps, but I do like it because you can customize it quite a bit. And I actually have an error somewhere in mine. Oh, it's because of this. It has to be done in RFI. All right, cool. So then I'm just screwing around with code kind of right now. So this is what Visual Studio Code looks like. If you're interested in having an actual editor on yours, then you're more than welcome to follow along on the presentation, and then we can go on and continue from there if you guys need any help. So is everyone kind of in some form? You are more than welcome to follow along if you want using that. But just wanted to make sure that you guys were in some way able to access Python. And again, my apologies. We are going to be going over Python 2 just because it does have a bigger community. It's been around longer. There's more support out there for you guys, but we will go over some of the differences between Python 2 as well as Python 3. And then let me do something real quick. All right, cool. So then if anyone is having issues, just let me know. But as long as you're able to access something, then we're more than fine. So just remember, this is recorded, so I will likely have to edit out the times that I decided to say some things that were interesting. So we're just going to go over, a lot of people usually how they teach Python is they'll have you run a print statement with hello world, which I mean, yeah, we'll get to that. But one of the things that I think is more important is really talking about the data types and the arithmetic within Python first. So then the data types within Python you have four. You have the integer, float, string, and Boolean. So what you have right here is you have your integers, which are typically whole numbers that can be negative or positive. And then you have your floats, which are your decimal numbers, strings, which are a string of characters. And then you have Boolean true or false values, which can be represented also as 1 or 0. So respectively 1 or 0, there we go. So true is 1, false is 0. And inside there, you have some examples on the side. So if you want to look into if you want to actually type in some of these, then they'll actually show the declaration and the initialization of the variable. So to set an integer as a variable, then you would type in some arbitrary name. You can call it myInt, you can call it, your name, you can call it anything you want, and you just put equals to, and you can set that number to, or set that value equal to your variable name. So then this is how to set basically an integer. This is how to set a float. This is how to set your string, as well as Boolean, which we'll go into later when we get to another slide. But I just wanted to kind of get you guys aware of kind of how these slides are going to work. So this is how to initialize them, which we'll get into in the future. And we have the arithmetic. So the things that you're going to notice are you're going to have addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Your exponent is going to be 2 asterisks, and then the modulo symbol. So let me check chat real quick. All right, cool. Sounds good. So let me go on and actually, we'll get into like some coding examples in a little bit. So then as far as arithmetic, everyone pretty much knows what addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, you guys know how to take a power to a power. So one of the things that I'm actually going to explain is the modulo, because this is a little bit harder for people to conceptualize. So the modulo, if you have taken a course in C or done any programming language, basically what it does is it you divide a number by another number, and then whatever the remainder is, it'll store it within that category or within that variable. So then say you had, let's say you had, say you had 15 and you were going to do modulo 4. So then the thing is that 15 can only be divided by 4 3 times. So then it would take the 3 because it can be divided, and 4 times 3 is 12. So there would be a remainder of, if you were able to fit 4 inside 15 3 times evenly, then you would have a remainder of 3 that you couldn't account for. So then the modulo operator would take that remaining number, and it basically uses the square of numbers, or basically if it can multiply something to get close to it. So if you have 20, then you can multiply, if you continue up the line, there's 2 by 2, 3 by 3, 4 by 4, things like that. Then it'll divide whatever number it can closest to it, and then store the remainder of it inside the modulo. So one of the benefits of the modulo is that, say you wanted to group things together and wanted to find out what the remainder of them was, then you could easily use the modulo operator to find out how much remaining you would have, and then continue to work your numbers based off that modulo number continuing to update itself. So if that didn't make sense, I'm so sorry. We will go into examples soon when we actually talk about coding. So then basically this is just some conceptual pseudocode. This is not real code because I'm showing you guys the outputs. So if you have initialized number 1, my num1, and then you set it equal to 20, then you have num2, so this is an integer right here, and then you have num2, which is set to a float, which is a decimal number, and it's 10.0. Then you have num3, which is also set to a float. So if you did num1, which is an integer, plus a float, then you'll go on and get a float because it is the more precise of the numbers. So you'll get 30.0. Then if you get num1 minus num2, then you'll also get a float because of the precision of numbers. It's always going to go by the more precise data type that was inside the arithmetic operator. So then again, following all of these, so then let's see. So if we did, here's an example of the modulo. So if you did num1 divided by num2, so if you did 20 divided by 10, you're going to get 0 because it calculates evenly into it and there's really no remainder to it. So any questions of that so far? If you guys do have them, you are more than welcome to throw them inside the chat and I will take care of them as they come. And then let me actually share these slides with you just in case you guys need to rip any of the examples or any of the code off of it, or if you just want to have them for a later date. So let me actually get to the PES Discord and get those for you guys. And let me go on and throw them in chat. All right, cool. So now that you guys have that, if you guys want to reference that or rip any of the code, you are more than welcome to. All right, cool. So then whenever you set variables, what you're going to do first is Python automatically assigns, you give it a name, you set it equal to something, and based off whatever number or data type you gave it, it's automatically going to decide your data type for you. So then for those of you that have taken or seen C, you'll have to put in, int, your name of your variable, and then whatever the number is you want to set it to, or the string. Now with Python, the thing about it is that it'll automatically detect whichever data type you have and automatically set it to it. So then for those of you that haven't already, I recommend, let me actually get the same link up that I gave to you guys. All right, cool. Let me see. So for those of you that can see my screen, so say you were to set variables, then all you really have to do is just give it numbers and it'll set them up for you. So then I could even name one after myself and set it to true, and there should be no issue. So then if I was to, which is kind of getting ahead of myself, but if I was to print, whatever I am, my name, because it is now a variable, then it'll print true. So you can just set variables by picking your name, setting it equal to some value, and from there, Python will figure out the data type for you. That's one of the nice things about it. So one of the issues that you're going to have with Python is what happens if you want to use a different data type and it automatically sets something for you. which a common issue is when we get to input. So if you're getting information from the user on Python, whenever you request information to have someone type it in, then Python automatically converts it into a string or, into characters. I mean, sorry, not characters. There's no characters here. I meant like a string of characters and considers it a string data type. So basically, just to give you guys kind of a synopsis, the purple is the variable name, the value is orange, and then as stated before, so Python automatically decides the variable for you. And the answer is, if we don't want Python to automatically assign something for us, then we can cast for it. So basically casting is putting a wrapping around your variable and converting it from one data type to another. So if you try to add a string that has the number -1 in it, because it's of the string data type and considered kind of like a word, you can't really add a word to a number, to an integer. So you have to cast that string to either be an integer or a float, so you can add those two numbers together. So the way to convert an integer, or to convert anything else to an integer, you would use the casting int with the parentheses, and from there you would end up putting your variable's name. So let me actually show you an example of that. So let me actually pick it back up. So if you guys are on the, let me go on and enlarge this. All right, cool. So if you guys are on the actual editor itself, go on and set some variables for yourself and set them to whatever you want. Let's go on and try a few data types. Go on and set an integer, set a float, and then set a string. And we'll use those to mess with for the remainder of this. I should probably make them different just so that I don't get them mixed up. All right, cool. So I have so far an integer. I've set a string, which you can either do single quotes or double quotes with Python 2. And then I have my last one, which is a float. So then just to show you guys, if you wanted to, print one of these, then all you would really do is put your variable's name right after the print, because it's Python is straightforward. All you need to do is type in what you want to print and it'll do it for you. So from there, I printed my val, which is 8. And if I wanted to do, I'm sorry, I put my num and I did my name. That is not a number. I am not a number. There we go, my name. So all you really need to do is type in the variable's name. And from there, it types my name. So if anyone is following along, just let me know so that I don't continue and but if you guys are following along and using the online compiler that I recommended, then just give me like a yes or no. You can send it to me privately if not, just so that I know that someone's following along. That way, if you guys do want to use the compiler and continue to have kind of like examples where we do this together, then we can. Or if you guys just want the technical knowledge and to continue through, then we can. Cool. Thank you, Brenda. Anyone else also following along with the compiler? We got 2 out of 3. I'm pretty happy with that. So. All right, cool. So then I'm actually going to do this. Well, should I do it in Visual Studio? Well, probably all of you are using the other one, so I'll probably just stick with this one. So then if you were to cast something, then let's go on and set one of these inside your string. Go on and set that to a number. And the way that you're going to do it is because one of them is, so I'm just going to go on and put a single line comment, which we'll get to in a little bit. So the line above it is an integer, or is an int, and the line below it is a string. I should not be typing in things like this in a single line comment, but okay. And so one of the things is you cannot add a word to a number. So whenever you cast, what you should probably do is go and create a new variable and put answer as your name, and then go on and put or whatever your number's name is, and then let's go on and cast the actual let's cast your string. So then go on and put the int as your casting, and then type in within the parentheses the name of your string. So what I'm doing is I have set up my answer, as my variable, and I am setting it equal to my val, which is an int, plus also an int now because it was casted. So then whenever you do that, it's going to allow you to now print whatever the answer is. So when I do that, we should get 16, or my computer should explode, either one. But so that's what happens. And if you were to do this and not cast it, then you would get a stack error, and it would reference that line where you have the error. So in this one, it said, that there's an error on line 6, and it's going to tell you there's an unsupported operand type, and it's because this is a string. So that's really the purpose of casting, is for you to make something that isn't what it is something else. So then that's just a quick example for you guys. And let me go on and go back to the presentation. So again, Python's like super, super straightforward. So then you can do the same thing with these. So one of the reasons why we bring this up is because for casting is if you were to do integer division between numbers, sometimes you want to have them converted to a float because you won't get the precision that you need. There's this thing with encoding that probably, everyone who's taken C, you're kind of familiar with C happens, is truncation, where your code ends up, rounding up or rounding down depending on what language you're using, and dropping the remainder value. So sometimes you need to convert one of them to a float so that you actually get the correct number, rather than getting, if you were to do something like 5 divided by 2, then some programming languages would only give you 2 because it's only going to give you the highest precision of the numbers you're dividing. But if you include a float in there, which has a decimal point and a higher precision, then now that's a purpose of casting for you to use. So one of the examples that I have right here is basically kind of what we did. So we have my variable equals a string 7, and we have created a variable that's in my way. All right, cool. We've created a variable called myvar and put it into a string. Now, this is a multi-line comment right here. So then I'm just showing you guys that because it is the absolute incorrect way to do it, because there is no casting involved in it. And the correct way to do it is really to cast it. And once you cast that integer, or once you cast that string and put it back into itself to update, then Python can directly output the arithmetic operation and result just using the print statement. So if you want to type in, a number like print, and then you were to do, 10 divided by 3.5, then it would give you the number itself, because you don't just need to put names within there of what your variables are. You can also put arithmetic statements. So have I lost anyone yet? Are we still doing all right? You guys should have the slides, so if you want to rip anything, you are more than welcome to. All right, cool. So then now we're going to go on and get on to commenting and printing. So what I'm going to show you guys is kind of what I did earlier. So these are single line comments, and these single line comments, my brain's spastic right now, sorry. So single line comments, basically what they do is you are able to annotate your code in a way and be able to put comments in here to keep track of your code. So then if you wanted to, continue to type more without having it affect your code, single line comments can only be used for one line. But if you were to put three quotes, that's 4. All right, there we go. That's 4. Okay, there we go. So then if you were to put 3, I've just put this whole segment right here that's on my screen into a quote. So now it won't even run. So then if I go on and run this code, rather than having it print my answer, which was 8 before, then what will happen is nothing will appear on my screen, because the part of my code that actually executed is now a comment and a note to myself. But if I was to take these triple quotes off, then it should give me an error if I remember correctly, because it's not casted. And let me go on and cast this real quick so we can get an actual number, and we should get 16. So then that's how the comments work, is you can give yourself some notes within your code to go on and refer back to, as well as if you wanted if you wanted to write yourself an essay for a later date, then you are more than welcome to write amongst several lines, and it'll just continue to let you. Oh, okay, I see why it's doing that. It just keeps recommending to add 4. So And that's one of the uses of the single line versus the multi-line comments. So one of the things that we're going to talk about is, let me see. Actually, I have to get back on track now. All right, cool. So I'm glad I put these numbers here. So then in this one, basically what we did is I'm showing you guys have already learned how to initialize a variable, have already learned how to do, your int, your string, the modulo operator, and that Python can directly do arithmetic operators within a print statement. And then from here, there's actually this thing that you can do called concatenation. So concatenation is basically where here's your string, and you're telling it exactly what you want to put in it. And now you're telling it, okay, go on and add to that string another string, and here it's PES, Power and Energy Society. And we're adding to that blank space, and then this variable up here is an int. But because you cannot concatenate a string with anything else, you now have to cast it to be a string. So let me go on and rip this code as well from here so that you guys can see it, and then we can actually do it inside the compiler. I'm sorry, not really compiler, but the IDE. All right, cool. So for anyone that needs this, it is going to be in chat so that you can run it. And we'll go on, I'm going to type it in mine as well so that you guys can see. And let me get rid of all of this. Actually, no, I'm not going to get rid of all that. I'm just going to get rid of that. There we go. So then one of the reasons why we do this is because if you were to, so this is a string, this is a variable that equates to a string, this is a blank space, which is also a string because there's double quotes around it, and then you have something that was an integer that is now converted to a string. So just take a minute, think about what this may compile to. And after a little bit, go on and click your run button. Don't look at my screen if you're still thinking about it. And what it did is it concatenated all of those, it put them together. So what it did is it put your string new as well as your variable, which is also a string, PES, and then put your space between your variable PES and your previous integer, which is now a string 2. So then basically what it did is just compiled all these together and put them into one printed statement. Now, one of the things that you're probably wondering is why do you do single quotes here, but you do double quotes here? Well, one of the reasons why I chose Python 2 to teach you guys and to bring up is because, again, Python 2 does have, more libraries available to you, more support. It's been around longer besides Python 3. And there are some syntax changes between Python 2 and Python 3 that make it, if you run your code on one, it won't necessarily transfer to the other. So as long as in Python 2, you have the same quotation that you started with at the end of your string, then it'll go on and accept it. So if you use a single quote, you have to finish with a single quote. But if you start with a double quote, you have to end with a double quote. Now, if you do this and have a single quote and then a double quote, then you'll have an error within yours and it'll reference the stack. So then right here, it points to line 7 and basically says, hey, there's a syntax error. You didn't start it with the same thing that you didn't finish it with the same thing that you ended. So you always have to either start with a single quote or a double quote. So is anyone confused about concatenation? Have any questions so far? If not, feel free to set your closest village on fire and we will continue from there. All right, cool. So then if there's no questions on this, so let me check. All right, so if there's no questions, I do expect some burned down villages, but basically I'm just showing you guys that you can combine things within a print statement, and a print statement does not just need to have one parameter. So another thing that we're going to talk about is escape characters. So escape characters, let me present this, sorry. So escape characters, I'm just showing you 3 basic ones because we are introing you into Python. A few of you are probably wondering, John, why the hell are you bringing up Python when we're Power and Energy Society? Which of course we're going to get to later. And for those of you who have joined our general meetings, you probably understand and will beat me to it every single time. But a few of the basic escape characters are you have the backslash, which is an escape character. You have your new line. You have your new line, and then you have your tab. So these are just 3 basic ones that you should know. I'm not going to try to give you guys any other ones that cause override of your code or override of print statements. but we can go into that later on if you guys found this useful, helpful, or truly did get something out of it. So basically, escape characters are used because they cause your code to interpret whatever comes after them differently. So Python has certain reserved symbols or characters that it uses, and it's kind of like, okay, so like with Halloween, like, Michael Myers knife and everything. It's kind of like if someone showed up behind you, or like someone showed up to your house with that in the middle of the night, like you automatically, assume that you either need to make your prayers, or you should probably call whoever you know and, say you love them. So Python has this certain thing about it that it decides and has certain reserve words that it associates with things. So the same way how, if you have something like that going on, the same way if you have something like that going on that associate with, I'm about to meet God soon, then Python has characters that it associates with certain tasks or certain things. So basically what Python does is I'm actually going to rip this as well so that you guys can see it. All right, cool. So let me rip this real quick and get it to you guys. All right, cool. So I'm actually going to go back to this. You guys are more than welcome to throw that code inside your thing and compile it. So one of the reasons why I bring this up is because there are these escape characters. If you were to use them within your code might interpret what you mean as something else. So if you wanted to use a backslash to separate things within your code, like words to make it easier for you to see, the thing is Python assumes that that's an escape character and it's not going to want to use it. So then go on and try within your IDE, your online IDE, go on and type in that code that has, I'm sorry, not the output one. Let me actually adjust that for you guys because it's gonna give you an error. All right, cool. So this last one that I sent you, or you can just put a single line comment in front of the output. I just forgot to take that out for you guys whenever I sent it to you. So then if you print the first line, then what's going to happen is that you're going to print out, aesthetic with the parameters that you want with the two backslashes, because it's telling you, okay, on this backslash, the next character that's going to come, then do not do the action that you normally associate it with. Go on and just print it as normal. But if you put both of these print statements within your code, you're going to notice that there's an error because this backslash right here on the very end is an escape sequence, and it tells Python, okay, the next character, ignore it. Like whatever you think you have, going with it, whatever you think you have as far as instructions, just completely ignore it. So then if you put in the first print statement, you're going to get, aesthetic with the two parentheses that you want. I mean, parentheses, the backslashes. But if you go on and do it with the last one, you're going to get a stack reference and an error where it's basically going to point to that line and said, you done goofed up. Go on, try again. So, and how many of you guys have already thrown that in there just to check it out? All right, cool. Hey, Andrew. I actually think I have you for one of my classes, so nice to see you. Nice to see you. Cool. So we're basically, I'm just going to kind of backtrack a little bit. So then for those that just joined, basically what we're doing is I recommended an online IDE for Python that you can go on and check out and follow along with us if you want. And we're just running through some coding examples, kind of talked about so far, data types, the arithmetic behind it, casting, how to print variables. And then next we're going to go into kind of input as well as some of the errors you may face. So then just to make sure everyone's still kind of alive, right? All right, cool. We got a yeah. Maybe she got murdered like right in the middle of that. All right, cool. So that's what'll happen. So then if you were to, or sorry, Andrew, I know you just joined. But if you want to hop on that IDE, then I will go on and take you through as easy as possible. Let me go on and send you individually the code that I currently have on here, just so that you can make some use of it later. All right, cool. So then you are more than welcome to type that into the IDE online, and it'll just automatically compile it for you. This seminar is actually about Python 2 because I believe Python 2 has, a lot more libraries, more support. It's been out longer, and that's why I'm doing Python 2 for you guys. So long story short, I'm going to go on and do it myself as well, just for those of you who, have decided not to, just that we all are on the same page and I can continue. So if you were to print that, it'll just print the actual word itself. That's really it. But if you were to use, escape sequences or escape characters, then let me actually get rid of my error because I have an error somewhere. All right, cool. No, I don't. So then it'll print it like this. And we were just talking about escape characters because say you were to not have these and you just use escape characters like that, then you're going to run into an issue because what will happen is by having Python say, Python is very direct, so you can just tell it what you want to print, put it in quotes, and it'll go on and print it for you. So what will happen is if you used escape characters without giving it something to escape from or to tell, don't think of this next character as whatever you normally think of it as, then it'll skip over it. So this escape character right here is telling you, or is telling Python, okay, whatever you think you interpret the double quotes as, which is closing our statement normally, don't think of it as that. Just ignore it, leave it alone. And that's why you're getting this error is because it's ignoring this closing of your statement. The A is perfectly fine. It's not really doing much. But if you were, the way to fix this is if we wanted to use this backslash as a real character, then we're using the first backslash, which is an escape character, to say, okay, this next character is regular, it's a regular symbol. Just print it. Just print it. Don't say anything. Just do it. So that's what it's doing, and that's why we're talking about escape sequences, is because there's some times where you're going to need data or need to display something or put a tab in something. Like an escape sequence is also, an escape character is also a backslash t. So if I was to do this and put backslash t in front of the word aesthetic, then what it's going to do is cause a tab and space out wherever aesthetic is put. So if I was to put 2 just because I want the world to burn or something, then I'll just put 2 and it'll space it out even further. Now, if I wanted to, start on a new line, then I can put the escape sequence, -n, and it'll go to that part of the code after PES2, and it'll go to that line, then it'll go to another line, so it'll print it 1 line further, and then it'll tab it out 2 spaces and type aesthetic. And there we go. Now I brought it even further from PES. So that's just kind of what escape sequences are. They allow you to modify how the interpreter views the code or how it interprets the following sequence, and basically either does a set of directives like starts at a new line, pushes it further down on a tab, or tells it to ignore the character that's directly right after it. Any questions on that? Anyone kind of confused? Let me go back to my presentation as well. All right, so I guess that one is speak now or forever hold your peace. So now we're going to talk about input. So the reason why I decided to use Python 2 is because I'm not going to lie, I'm more familiar with it. That is also one reason, and because they have different syntax. So Python 2 uses raw underscore input as its function to get input from the user. So go on, and I'm actually going to do this with you. So let me actually minimize this. You see, I think I'm tech savvy until I try to minimize something. Okay, there we go. So then say I was to, I'm actually going to get rid of all my print statements just so that I can, follow along with you guys. So go on and create go on and create a variable, and you can, name it your name. I'm just going to name it me. So I'm Jonathan. I am the chair of PES. Very nice to meet you guys. And I'm going to put raw input, and I'm going to put a quote in there because I want it to ask me something so that I know it's asking me for input. So you can leave this blank if you want, and it'll just basically have a prompt for you to type something in. So if I compile this, okay, it's screaming right now. So maybe it's just my computer. Okay, mine's being like super laggy. I'm sorry about that. Let me check my Wi-Fi real quick. All right, cool. Let's try this one more time. Okay, cool. There we go. I just had to get rid of a print statement. So then if you were to create a new variable like your name and set it equal to raw input, then this is just a prompt right here. This is just a print statement that I put inside here because the raw input will print something if you want, as well as ask the user for input. So if I was to give the input of, PES, then it's not really going to do anything with it because all I'm doing is storing it within Jonathan, my name. But if I was to say, print whatever is stored in Jonathan, then whatever I type right here, it'll print for me again. So that's the purpose of using raw input, is to get data from the user. But if this makes a little bit more sense to you guys, then I can do it like this also. So then I can separate these and put a print statement and say, type something. And those of you saw that my computer's going to die, but it's okay because we're going to wrap this up soon. So if I was to just put, print and then a string in double quotes that says type something, then the next variable, the next line after it will ask for input, ask the user for input. And then from there, I'm going to print the user's input. So then I'm going to go on and put this as well in chat, just for those of you who are, I know during my programming classes at UTSA that, me and Brenda were both in, I got lazy a lot of times and I didn't want to type what he was typing. So I completely understand that. So then this says, type something. Why did I put a question mark after that? Okay. And then whatever I type in here, nope, that's not gonna work. Then it's just gonna relay it back to me. So then that's how to use the raw input on there. And one of the reasons why I decided to use Python 2 is because you'll probably run into it more often than people programming within Python 3. And let me get back to my presentation, wherever I put that. I think I lost it. Okay, no, we're good. All right, cool. So then this basically just takes data from the user, sets it automatically as a string, and then prints out whatever you had. So, and this is beneficial. One of the things that I did in this one right here that you'll see for Python 2 is I ended up converting it to an int, because if I decide to give it a number and I want to use a number, Python, whenever you get raw input from the user, automatically converts it to be a string. And you can't do anything with a string besides concatenate. So you have to convert it to an int, convert it to a float, whatever you need to do calculations if you need. So some of the differences between Python 2 and Python 3. So in Python 2, you use the function raw underscore input, and then that collects input from the user's keyboard. But in Python 3, they just use input, open parentheses, close parentheses. And so that's the difference between those two, which, pick your firepower, whichever one you want, will not hurt me in the long run. Might hurt me later, I don't know, we'll figure it out. And finally, we're getting to, why are you teaching us this? Why did you decide to have a Python workshop for Power and Energy Society? One of the things that I get from a lot of people is, why should I join your organization if you're pretty much just about power and energy? Like, don't you guys just do substations and transformers and shock the living crap out of yourself or something? I don't know. And that's really, when it comes to Power and Energy Society, we are a technical society dedicated to the research, the transmission, the distribution, the education of electrical power. But what happens is we focus on optimization of grids, which use machine learning. Prototyping is why I'm teaching you guys this programming, is because we do have our microgrid/smart grid project coming up within the spring, where we will actively assemble teams to work on prototypes to simulate a grid, to simulate power distribution. We'll be working with AC to AC rectifiers, AC to DC, and things like that. So the reason why I'm teaching this is because we're actively going to have projects later on where we are going to model grids and model cities, create smart grids, create microgrids, and try to model these cities' power requirements. And from there, you're going to have to deal with everything from, AC power, DC, programming it, monitoring it, doing data analyzation using Python, using, your Raspberry Pi to control all of this as the microcontroller. And that's truly one of the reasons. So whenever you have a Raspberry Pi, so I know this is kind of shifting subjects, but whenever you have a Raspberry Pi, for those of you who have seen one, I showed one at our circuit social that I did earlier in the month. You have these pins at the top, and you have your GPIO pins, which stand for general purpose input output, and you have your ground, your voltage sources, as well as your advanced use pins. So the general purpose input output pins, you are able to set as an input or an output. So you can either read something from it or you can send a signal through it. And what we're going to do is going to be using that to control our cities, to control our the data that we're getting from them, so that we can one, you use data analyzation and machine learning to optimize our smart grid and our microgrid, but also so that we can control all the variables within it, or if we need to, activate a rectifier circuit or change, distribute, um, convert AC down to a lower, higher voltage, then we can do this. So this is, directly Python code right here inside the pink, blue, and the purple and white. And you are importing the RPy GPO library as GPIO, and you're just importing all of this. And what you're doing is you're now using its functions, GPI setup mode, to set one of these pins, which the BCM, it basically just sets your pin pattern. So then this right here, GPIO.setup18, basically takes the 18th pin, which is, where's the 18th pin? All right, cool, it's right there. So right where my cursor is, so it takes the 18th pin and it sets it to an output. And then right after, we use another line of code within the GPIO library that we imported, and we set that 18 pin as an output to high. So we're sending a high voltage logic symbol out to whatever it is. And for those of you who are not acquainted with microcontrollers, basically what we do is, a high voltage can mean, or I'm sorry, no, I'm not gonna say that. So a high voltage or a low voltage means certain things to certain softwares as well as hardware. So if it's kind of like, it's kind of like it's kind of like smoke signals. So like say you were in the next village over and someone is in your village and you so happen to burn someone else's village down, then the smoke that you see from them indicates that their village is now burnt down and you should probably either watch out for your village or you should probably go help them. And whenever it comes to the RPi, what happens is if you send a high signal, you are saying some event is happening. So say we have the RPi set up to say, when you detect a voltage crosses this threshold, then activate another pin to send a signal out that is high, and then have that do some action like activate the rectifier circuit, drop the voltage, use a transformer X, Y, and Z. So that's one of the reasons why we're using the microcontroller and why this logic is used within programming. So Python and RPy is probably the easiest way for you to be able to interface programming with actual hardware. So that's just one of the reasons. So if you're wondering, why we taught this, it's for prototyping, for a microgrid/smart grid project, as well as for data analyzation. One of the things that PES focuses on is actually machine learning for grid optimization and security. So although are not there yet, ideally what we want to do is try to build up the skill level of everyone. So with that, that is really all I have for today. I just have,